Since her first appearance almost 40 years ago in the original Super Mario Bros., Princess Peach Toadstool has cemented herself as one of the most iconic female characters in gaming, her elegance gracing the majority of Mario titles and various spin-offs. Her role in the series has often been an oppressed one. She's continually been snatched away and in need of rescue by the mustachioed plumber. Her captor has often been Bowser, the King of Koopas, seemingly infatuated with her while also wanting to take over her kingdom, but various nefarious nemesis have also had her in their clutches. For as much as she's one of the most recognised ladies in the medium, she's undoubtedly also one of the most kidnapped. This makes her what's known as a damsel in distress, a helpless woman who has to be rescued by a heroic man. It's a trope that goes as far back as ancient Greece and medieval fairy tale stories and still exists in modernity, although it's increasingly seen as outdated and sexist. Nintendo, to their credit, have often given their female characters more agency than the stereotype would allow. Zelda, while spending a good chunk of time in captivity or protective custody, often assists and works alongside Link as a third of the Triforce. Some would argue that Tears of the Kingdom was more a story about her rather than her mute knight. Metroid's Samus Aran has been historically badass, her female form even disguised under a morph suit to begin with in 1986, her end-screen face reveal suddenly subverting expectations of what a video game girl should be able to do. Although let's overlook the fact that the better you had played, the more scantily clad she would appear. Peach, however, has adhered to typically feminine traits more than her pixelated peers. The girly colours of her pastel pink dress, yellow blonde hair and bejewelled accessories have often made her stand out more, compared to the rugged and overprotective men who often surround her, while her lifestyle has been depicted as sophisticated and her personality motherly and caring. That being said, the First Lady of Gaming has often broken the mould to prove herself capable in her own right, regularly surprising those around her with an unexpected headstrong attitude. This is what's made her a particularly interesting and sometimes divisive figure. The ability to conform to the traditional idea of femininity while routinely being an exception to this rule, the New York Times magazine once even describing her as a post-feminist melding of old and new standards. To mark the release of Princess Peach Showtime, we're going to look back at the games in which she's been the leading lady, or had a significant supporting role, especially the ones in which she's actually been controllable. Things like Mario Kart and Mario Party don't count. I'm talking titles that are more canonical in terms of characterisation and development across the series, like main entries and ones that are more narrative focused. So let's start at the beginning. Peach appeared back in the very first Super Mario Bros. Game in 1985, marking the first in a long line of abductions by Bowser. I've never really understood this sprite, is that her mouth? Anyway, Mario would eventually rescue her from the Koopa King's clutches at the end of World 8, having infamously been told she was in another castle after conquering the previous 7. She was certainly objectified here, not in a sexual way, but framed as a clear goal in a simple storyless game. Miyamoto revealed around the launch of last year's movie that he had always had desires to make her powerful and playable. This is something that would eventually come to fruition in the years that followed, starting with Super Mario Bros. 2, the Western version anyway, which saw Peach introduced as one of the 4 protagonists alongside Mario, Luigi and Toad. However, SMB2 famously didn't start life as a Mario game, but as Yume Kojo, Doki Doki Panic, using Fuji TV's mascots. Peach was simply a replacement for the genie-like Lina, so it's debatable as to whether this was really a proper attempt at establishing the princess as a heroine. As I mentioned in my video about Super Mario All-Stars, which you should go watch after this one, it's funny how a Mario game that was never intended as one ended up having such an impact on the series overall. And that includes Peach. The dainty floating ability that she inherited in the reskin would follow her into future platformers, including 3D World and Wonder. Her first starring role would come a few years later as a piece of 90s ephemera. Princess Toadstool's Castle Run was one of a line of LCD game watches, themselves part of a McDonald's promotion in 1990, reportedly only obtainable via a winning scratch card, which might otherwise have netted you a Big Mac. Players control the princess as she dashes towards her castle in the distance, using the left and right buttons to avoid Koopas and escort Toads to each other. Simplistic, yes, and not exactly a blockbuster title, but this incredibly rare little gadget is indeed the first time Peach would go it alone. I'm not quite sure why they felt the need to change her appearance between the Japanese and US versions though, the latter replacing her delicate features with this kind of freakish westernised visage. Where Peach has consistently shone is in RPGs, which have continually been fertile ground for developing the Mario world and its denizens more than any platformer could hope to. In the very first one, Super Mario RPG, she's taken by Bowser and rescued by the plumber within like the first 10 minutes, but a colossal sword then falls from the sky, crashes into the castle and sends the characters flying across the kingdom. The princess unfortunately ends up being held captive by someone other than King Koopa, this time a maniacal childish Viking named Booster, who tries to marry Peach before Mario bursts into the wedding to fend off her would-be husband. It's like the bloody end of The Graduate. After doing so, the gang return Peach to the Mushroom Kingdom castle, where you can actually find an unidentified private item behind her fireplace. Dirty-minded fans have speculated as to what this might be, but we'll get on to the more blatant innuendo later. Upon the guys leaving, the rebellious royal sneaks out from under the noses of her custodians and joins the team in the fight against Smithy. Flanked by Bowser, who's also playable for the first time here, as well as newcomers Geno and Mallow, who were sadly never properly seen again outside of this game, she acts as a traditional healer, able to restore the party's HP and status. She's not without offensive prowess though, inflicting conditions on enemies and attacking with all manner of weapons, including a frying pan? She's been seen with this a few times across various games like Smash Brothers and Game & Watch Gallery, in which she's the eponymous chef. You could argue that this out-of-place usage of a kitchen utensil by a woman stems from a sexist perspective, but the fact she brandishes it as a weapon is an ironic feminist dismantling of the homemaker cliché. Or maybe I'm just reading into it too much and it's just a bit of amusing slapstick. SMRPG's spiritual successor, Paper Mario, followed at the turn of the millennium. It narratively regressed slightly in that it once again saw Bowser as the main villain and Peach as his victim, although he's creatively stolen her entire castle this time, her luxurious abode sitting atop his floating fortress high in the sky. The pink prisoner, however, only worries about the injured Mario and her incarcerated subjects, willing herself to be strong and figuring out how to save them. Her wish calls Twink to her aid, a little star who helps her relay information to Mario and with whom she develops a very sweet friendship. She calls him a stellar friend in their endgame goodbye, and he even struggles to tell her something, maybe even having feelings for her. What is it about Peach and attracting non-human suitors? More about this in a minute. In superbly fun segments between each chapter of the main story, players take control of the duo, creeping through the dark halls to eavesdrop on the guards. This even involves some irreverent minigames like taking part in a quiz show and baking a cake for a morbidly obese shy guy so he won't tell on her for sneaking out. She even helps in the final battle, using her wishes to power up Twink to enable him to defeat Kami Koopa. Be sure to enjoy my video on this paper-thin classic too. This continued in the sequel, Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door, a remake of which is coming this year to celebrate its 20th anniversary. This time she wasn't stolen away by Bowser, who himself became intermittently playable again, but by the X-Nauts, who I'm only just learning might actually be pronounced Cross-Nauts. They plan to use her as a vessel to awaken an ancient demon, but until that time comes, stash her in their base on the moon of all places. It's here that she befriends their supercomputer, a HAL-esque AI named Tech, who comes to understand love after spending time with the princess, in turn helping her communicate with the earthbound Mario. He even appears to peek at her in the shower at one point. Look at the folds on that. The climax of the game sees the evil Shadow Queen absorb Peach, turning her into a goth in the process for some reason. The princess then seemingly sacrifices herself to bestow Mario with the last of her power, giving herself up for the good of her kingdom and its people as their cries of support flood in. I honestly get a wee bit choked up every time I see this finale, and I'm glad that many more people will get to enjoy it now that it's no longer trapped on the GameCube. I'll do a video about it at some point in the future, so be sure to subscribe if you're a fan of Paper Mario 2. Peach's next appearance though was surely her most significant. Her first time headlining what we'll call a proper game, Super Princess Peach for the DS in 2005. This platformer actually predated the new Super Mario Bros. Revival and saw roles reversed as the princess set out to rescue the boys from Bowser, even earning herself the Super prefix in her moniker. She's joined by Perry, an anthropomorphic parasol comparable to Mario's Twink and Showtime's Stella, who functions as both a method of attack and transport, even able to become a boat or a submarine. It's more akin to the Yoshi's Island series than mainline entries, and features a fair few rarer enemies, some of which had only appeared in Super Mario World before then. It's surprisingly robust in terms of how you can upgrade Peach's abilities, as well as finding various unlockables to make thorough exploration of its levels rewarding. It was received well enough, but criticised by some for being too easy, an assessment with which the star agrees at the end of each level.
That was easy!
I did find some of the later stages modestly challenging, but easier to lambast is how Peach finds power in her emotions. At the touch of a button, she can cry to produce a cascade of water, become a fiery ball of rage, get so happy that she can inexplicably fly, and calm herself to gradually restore health. Some saw this as the reduction of a female protagonist to a set of mood swings, although Miyamoto argued otherwise, stating that several of the developers had come from matriarchal households and so this wouldn't have been their intention. This advert for it was good, showing some trainee princesses being put through military-style training, although I'm not sure this slogan at the end is the best idea in a trailer featuring young girls. There's also some weirdly out-of-place sexual innuendo centred around the Vibe Scepter. Just look at this text from the epilogue. Anyway, Enchanted Dildo aside, I can overlook these allegations of sexism towards the game and see it as more of a celebration of Peach's character, and a pleasant wee experience. But it's kind of a shame that it was presented in a way that set it up for this kind of criticism. 2007's Super Paper Mario, which combined RPG and side-scrolling platform mechanics, saw Peach return as a playable character, this time as an actual party member instead of only in interludes. Not only that, but she's one of 4 heroes whose arrival is foretold in a prophecy. The antagonist, Count Bleck, forces Bowser and Peach into wedlock in order to set this in motion, subsequently bringing about the end of the world. Their shotgun wedding almost feels tongue-in-cheek here, their usual kidnapper and damsel dynamic being appropriated for someone else's evil misdeeds. After falling into the enemy's lair in another dimension, Peach stands up for herself and makes a daring escape from Nastasia's mind control, something that her male teammate Luigi doesn't quite manage. Expressing her desire to help save the world, the wizard Merlin worries for the princess's safety. She takes umbrage at this, saying that she can't stand by and let everyone else save the world, an attitude which he then calls headstrong and refreshing. Peach's highlight of the game, however, is when she goes undercover as a totally hot babe to confront a reptilian weeb by the name of Francis. This takes place in the form of a dating sim, in which the player can choose her responses through an awkward conversation, only for her to eventually erupt with,
"Who's picking these responses for me anyway? I'm not marrying this dork,"
before blowing up his graphics card. Real babes are scary. We see several sides to Peach here, kind of ironic given the game's aesthetic. She's shown to laugh off the advances of various guys in the game, as well as teasing Bowser by calling him a sweetie after convincing him to help them on their quest. In the final chapter, Peach defeats one of Count Bleck's minions, Mimi, but afterwards tells her to get to safety as the castle crumbles around them. When the defeated villain refuses, Peach selflessly leaps to save her from falling into the abyss, risking her own life to help the enemy. The princess even questions her own actions, finding that she's done so instinctively. Mimi continues to resist, demanding to be left to die, but Peach says that she was raised to help people in need, even if they've been very, very bad. All in all, as much as I don't hold this game in as high a regard as I do the first 2 Paper Marios, it has some great examples of Peach showing her loving nature while fearlessly clashing with those who would see her as a stereotype. This was, to date, the last time Peach would appear as a playable character in an original Paper Mario game, having been relegated to an NPC in the less beloved entries that have followed. And while she's also been selectable in various outings in the years since, it's taken until recent times to see her properly step into the limelight again. The film made her a courageous leader of the Mushroom Kingdom, already assuring her people that she'll stop any harm coming to them at the hands of the invading army and hatching a plan of her own before a confused Mario even arrives at her castle. She has a much more assertive attitude towards him during their first meeting, which gives them a much different dynamic than what you'd expect. Mario becoming her comedic foil. She even says watch and learn before completing an obstacle course, the very kind of stage that the plumber has traditionally conquered in order to rescue her. I'm all for empowered women, but this seemed like such a jarring, oddly revisionist take on their long-established relationship. She does show some vulnerability when discussing her unknown past during a heart-to-heart with Mario, and later even agrees to marry Bowser on the condition that he won't hurt her toads, an act of sacrifice that shows her caring side is still present even if she has a much more fiery disposition. As I mentioned earlier, in an interview with Variety about the film, Miyamoto said that he'd always seen Peach as more than just a princess in peril, but that the simplicity of the NES didn't allow for her to be very well fleshed out. I'm not sure how much I believe that, given that it took until 1996 for an external developer to make a game where she showed anything close to being a heroine. He might have just been toeing the line in terms of marketing the movie with more modern sensibilities. But whatever the case, this commanding nature has now seemingly fed into Princess Peach Showtime, in which she attends a theatre performance only for it to turn into a tragedy when the Sour Bunch steal the show. Peach then has to take on a number of transformative roles in order to defeat them, including a sword fighter, detective, patissiere, martial artist, ninja, cowgirl, figure skater, thief, mermaid and superhero. The descriptions of these depictions on the Nintendo website are a little on the nose, noticeably using words like clever, talented, powerful and agile, as though the PR people are making a conscious effort to re-establish Peach's capabilities. But that doesn't make it a bad thing, and if a new audience of young girls or boys are inspired by the game, what a superb bonus. The box art was even subtly changed to make Peach look more determined, not unlike her filmic counterpart. Showtime was certainly a surprise announcement from last June's Nintendo Direct. I don't think anyone was expecting a new Peach game, but maybe it was an effort to capitalise on the wild success of the film. We've seen a fair few Mario-centric releases squeezed out in its wake: Wonder, the SMRPG remake, Showtime, and still the Thousand Year Door remake and the Luigi's Mansion 2 remaster to come. And while Showtime might be little more than an unchallenging but enjoyable romp, it might also come to be the most definitive example yet of Her Royal Highness Toadstool breaking the chains.